Hello and welcome to another episode of the Super Learning Professionals podcast. Today I have with me John Bates. John is a leadership communication expert. He worked with companies like Johnson & Johnson. He's trained NASA astronauts. He's one of the foremost TED format coaches. I did ODCC on that course creator fellowship together with John. I've gotten to know him quite a bit and he's a really nice, really high energy kind of fellow. So I'm very happy to have you here, John.
Thank you, Tom. I'm really glad to be here. I think over that course, we have begun a friendship that I value quite a bit.
Me too. It's been very, very great, John. Yeah, so maybe you can tell me a bit more about the area you work in and what are the kinds of, what's the important knowledge there and how do you manage that?
So, I work in an area that, I kind of backed into this, but it turns out to be something that I think is intensely important. My why, a la Simon Sinek, is to bring out what's awesome inside every person so it can live in the world and make a real difference. And the thing that I think people don't think about enough is that there's all this work that they're doing, all this really great hard work. Then they get this moment of exposure in, say, an interview or in an all hands meeting or when they present to the board or wherever they talk about their work. And together, those two things form an impression of them, right? So I call it PI, performance, all the work you do, the exposure you get, that's the E of PI. And then all that leads to an impression. And if people don't communicate as well as their ideas are awesome, then these awesome ideas don't make it into the world. And so that's the area of focus for me, is assisting people in making their communication and how they communicate about that awesome work they do match that awesome work.
That's awesome because communication is, I think, very underestimated, especially by technical people like me. It's like huge leverage, right? If you can communicate, if you're technically maybe not superior, you can reach many more people and add much more value than somebody who is maybe technically more experienced but doesn't have that skill.
Yeah, it's absolutely true, right? So I would love it if the people who had the best ideas were also the best communicators. That would lead to the best world,
Yeah, exactly. What was your personal learning journey to get to this, to become this expert in communication?
Well, I mean, this is not the route I always would recommend, but I think I just learned pretty much everything the hard way and kind of ended up failing at just about everything else I did and realized at a certain point that all of that failure and everything it taught me would give me an enormous amount of empathy and understanding and an ability to teach people in a much shorter period of time what it took me a lifetime to find the hard way. I was always worked at .com companies and right. I was always the chief evangelist for the company. I was always a founder or a co-founder or a super early employee. And I always ended up with the title chief evangelist. So that's what I did for my whole life, was essentially public speaking, evangelizing the company, business development. And I raised several $100 million in Silicon Valley and beyond, but I never had a successful exit. So then at a certain point about 10 years ago, I had this epiphany that, if I stopped being jealous of people with the hard skills and I actually shared my expertise with them in a way that could work for them, I could make a difference, So I based everything I did in human evolutionary biology and human neurophysiology so I could show people not just what to do when it comes to great communication and leadership and influence, but also why to do that based in science. And that just changed everything for me.
That's an awesome journey. And maybe to step back even further, how did you originally choose evangelist? As you said, that was what you wanted to do. And then what was the point where you said, actually, I have to go in this direction because that's where I can add most value?
Yeah. So, well, I think that I started out I did debate and public speaking in high school. just totally randomly. And I ended up having a really fabulous world-class coach at my public high school in Salt Lake City, Utah, where I grew up. And because he was so cool, I was totally coachable. I did anything he said. Whatever he asked me to do, I did it because he was cool. So it wasn't even that I did that on purpose, but that experience by accident made me a pretty good speaker. And then when I got into the world of business, that's just naturally where I gravitated to. But I never really got the value of it because I was always the soft skills guy hanging out with the hard skills guys, and they would call what I did fluffy, even though I was raising millions of dollars. So I kind of had a chip on my shoulder, and I wanted to prove I was valuable, but I didn't really think I was valuable. And then in 2009, I went to TED for the first time and really just had an epiphany when I watched those amazing TED Talks. And the first thing I realized, Dom, is that I'd been a public speaker my whole life, but I had never been doing that. That was a whole new level. So I came home, got really involved in TED and TEDx, wanted to figure that out and get really good at that kind of public speaking myself. And then at the same time, about the same time, everything else in my world dried up, Dom. It was right after 2008.
Right.
And so all of a sudden, even the jobs that didn't pay me enough money and gave me millions of dollars of useless stock, I was $50,000 in debt for most of my life, Dom. And at this point, that all started to dry up, right? So all of a sudden I was really in trouble. And, people talk about burn the boats. You got to burn the boats so there's no route home and you've got to go do what you say you're going to do. Well, I didn't have courage to light the boats on fire myself, but they caught fire anyway, And so I had to go do this. It was the only thing I could think of. For a while, Dom, I thought I didn't even have anything to offer at all. And I remember crying so hard that boogers were coming out, just because I was so scared and didn't know what to do. And then it dawned on me, well, I have been a public speaker. I love this TED format stuff. I have been a leader my whole life. I'm going to go do that, And for the first year, I just went further in debt. But on year 2, I kind of broke even. In year 3, I made more than I ever made in my whole life. And that just kept doubling and tripling. And so I finally found what I think I'm here to do, But it was not like some easy, straight journey.
I think the most powerful outcomes are always from very rough journeys, as you described.
Yeah.
That's very powerful. And so how did you start out this journey? Was that by coaching, or did you create a course from the beginning? And was that also inspired by the coach which originally inspired you in college, as you said?
Well, my coaching was certainly inspired by him. And at first I was doing my coaching sessions all the time live. And if somebody wanted to do one-on-one coaching with me, I would have to do what I call my Speak Like a Leader boot camp. I would have to basically perform that for them one-on-one. And I did that on pretty regular basis. And then it dawned on me that if I had this, I think it's a typical issue that creators go through, right? And that people with great knowledge or something great to offer go through. I could keep doing it like live, or I could take a big chunk of time and invest some time and money into creating it once. It's like writing a book. It's really hard to freaking write a book, but the minute that I finally wrote a book, people could read that book while I was sleeping. And I didn't have to be there. And so all of a sudden it was vastly more accessible. And same thing with an online course. And so I created an online course and started using it in my one-on-one coaching. Now, embarrassing thing to me, it's only very recently that I've been making that available in general out in the internet as a self-paced course. It's always only been part of my one-on-one coaching or my team coachings or things. So it hasn't been accessible. And in this course that I did with you and meeting people like you and being inspired by seeing what everybody was doing, I was like, okay, I knew this was dumb, but I didn't understand how dumb this was. So, I'm making that available now and doing a lot more with my online courses. And the good news is the beautiful thing for me and anybody that has this kind of knowledge is me telling them what's in the Speak Like a Leader bootcamp. It's fun and everything. But if I've already got the course and they can get that, now I can help them apply that. And that's really my zone of genius, right? Once they get it, and it didn't take my time for them to get it, now I can coach them and consult them. And that's a much higher value use of my time for both myself and them, right?
Yeah, I love that. And especially love that you basically the high leverage part, which is actually applying the knowledge that you have in real life and that you spend more time on that. And yeah, maybe you can tell me a bit more about techniques and other things that you have come up with for people to be able to actually apply this.
Okay. So the first thing that I want to say too, just to complete that thought, Dom, because it's something I think that your listeners would benefit from. I believe that it takes a certain amount of generosity of spirit to just get over yourself and put the time into developing a course, because it's hard to do that in the moment with all the other demands that are on our time. But if you're willing to step out of the stream of all that stuff you've got to do to create a really great course and really do a good job of that and make sure that it's going to give this knowledge to people in a way that they can use it, that's actually really generous of people, I think. And you've done that, Dom. I think it's it's if people understand that it's a generous and not so easy thing to do, I think it makes it easier to do it, And so you'd like me to talk about maybe some of the things I teach people and how to apply?
Yeah, I guess that would be very interesting, because that's something that I'm a bit less well versed in. So I know a lot about effective learning techniques to understand and memorize things, but the next level is applying them in real life. And I think you have a lot of great insights there.
Well, so I'll give you one that I think you might recognize from what you've done, and we'll just extend it out into the world. One of the things that I say all the time, Dom, that I think is at the absolute fundamental basis of not just public speaking, but everything we do with human beings, is that communicating with human beings is not logical. You may have noticed, right?
Yeah.
Communicating with human beings is not logical. It's biological.
Right.
And when you understand the biology, you can bring logic to it again. But anybody who goes in thinking logic by itself should win, well, hey, maybe everybody on earth agrees with you it should win, but when has should meant anything? Never, So to understand what that means, I'll give you one quick example, which is probably the most fundamental, basic, and important example. So, here's some of my best stuff. If you look at a cross section of the human brain, you'll see the brain stem. And then wrapped around that is the midbrain. And together they form what's called the paleomammalian brain. It's also called the limbic system. It's also called the emotional brain. 3 names, same thing. And then wrapped around the outside of that is our cerebral cortex, our neocortex. Now, the ancient brain, the paleomammalian brain, does not have access to language or logic or reason. That's all in the cerebral cortex, the neocortex, the new brain. But this ancient brain does have access to reality on a fundamentally deeper level than we will ever have access consciously. That's weird. I'll say it again. It doesn't have access to language or logic or reason, but it does have access to reality on a much deeper level. And what I mean by that is this is the part of our brain that smells pheromones, and it sees facial microexpressions, and it notices patterns in things that we'll never consciously notice, and all kinds of stuff like that, what it hears and smells. And And so that part of the brain doesn't have access to language or logic or reason, but it does see and notice these things. So how does it communicate with us? It gives us gut feelings. So if your mom didn't tell you, I'm telling you now, trust your gut. That's where that comes from.
Definitely.
It's your ancient brain perceiving that stuff. Yeah. And yet we all think that we live in our neocortex, our cerebral cortex. John, I'm logical, right? I mean, I'm going to weigh the choices out. I'll check the boxes. I make logical decisions. I'm an engineer and this is just how I think. Okay, well, that might be true. You might do all that. But if we put you, any of you, in an fMRI machine and watch your brain in real time as you make a decision, what we would see is, boom, your ancient brain fires first, making the decision. And then right after that, nanoseconds later, your cerebral cortex, your logical brain fires, agreeing with or disagreeing with the decision, but crucially not making the decision. And the way that impacts us in real life on all kinds of levels, right? Generalize this to the broadest edges of your communication with human beings. But what that looks like in practice is something like this. Do you like the product? Yeah, we like the product. Do you think it's priced right? Oh, yeah, certainly. It's a good price. Well, would you like to sign the check and we'll start delivery? No, we're not quite ready yet. Yes, we like it. Yes, it's priced right. Yes, it would make a difference. No, we're not ready yet. Okay, what just happened there? That's very frustrating. People get very upset about that. They don't think it makes any sense. But in hindsight, I'll tell you what just happened, and it's super obvious. Here's what happened. Yes, 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 no. That's logic, emotion.
Right.
Logically, we liked it, right? Logically, it was sound. Logically, it works for us. Logically, yes. But then the logical brain has to go through the emotional brain. It's wrapped around the outside of the emotional brain. And when it goes into the emotional paleo-mammalian brain, that part of our brain wasn't ready yet because we haven't made an emotional connection, right? If we don't have an emotional connection, if we don't have some way to feel like we're in the same tribe and we can trust each other, then the logical brain can be in 100%. But when it comes to that fourth and most important yes, we get a no because we didn't connect with the ancient paleo-mammalian brain, put it at ease, make an emotional connection. So that is one of the most important things that I ever teach people. And people always say, well, how do I do that? It doesn't mean that we've got to hold hands and cry and sing Kumbaya. It just means, one quick way to that, Dom. So, the one quick way to think about how you can make an emotional connection is small talk. Now, small talk has actually been misnamed. Small talk has been misnamed, and it's called small talk because we don't understand it. Because we could talk about anything, we think it doesn't matter, but it couldn't be further from the truth. Yes, we can talk about anything in small talk. It could be our dogs. It could be where we went to school. It could be where your daughter's going to school. It could be the weather. It doesn't matter what we talk about, but something does matter very much. And that thing that matters very much is that we talk about something that connects us in a way that connects us. So if you start looking for how can I connect with people, how can I make this small talk into big talk, that's the most direct route to getting what I call the fourth and most important yes. So it goes yes, 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 yes versus yes, 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 no.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And yeah, I think from your whole talk, it looks like you've thought deeper about this than probably 99.9% of people in the world. That enables you to give this very practical advice to people, which I really love. I think that's great.
Yeah, and this goes back directly, Dom, to I learned this all the hard way, right?
Yeah.
I screwed up running into that wall of, well, logically, makes total sense. Yeah, but you know what? Logic's necessary, but it's not sufficient. And I failed and failed and failed, and then finally figured this out and started applying it, and everything changed. And I was like, oh, okay, got it. So now nobody that's hearing this ever has to fail any longer than till right now. Like from now on, you don't have to fail because of yes, 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 no, right? You can always make that emotional connection and get yes, 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 yes.
Do you see this in practice that, with this guidance that you give, basically people can kind of take a shortcut and get this practical yes, 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 yes without failing the hard way?
Yes, Dom, I have in my email, I just got an email from a guy who sent me an email first because he had won a $1 million prize with no strings attached in a pitch competition. Then immediately in that same email, he went a few days later and won a $200,000 no strings attached grant at a pitch competition. And most recently, he just won another $2 million grant with no strings attached for his company that with a pitch in a pitch competition. And he has written me every time and thanked me because he says there's no way that I would be doing it like I'm doing it if it weren't for you, and that's why I'm winning.
That's awesome.
And it's so fulfilling, Dom. It's so exciting to get those kinds of emails.
Yeah.
And it's based in science. That's the other thing, like as a not so hard skills guy, it took me a while to realize that of course it's going to work all the time. It's based in science, right? That's why we can put someone on the moon and why, the internet works and all this cool stuff that is so amazing. It's based in science. Science works.
Definitely. Yeah, that's very powerful. And John, I also know like you are a very high energy guy and you bring that energy to other people and you're very good at inspiring people. And maybe do you have some tips about how we can inspire others around us that we work with or our colleagues or our subordinates to get the same level of energy and the same love of learning as well?
Dom, I'm reading a book right now that I really love, and it's called The Untethered Soul. And it's a really beautiful, really spiritual book with some really great practical advice. And I think there are a few ways I would answer that question. And I'm super honored that you would say that. And it's something that I have consciously enabled in myself. And so there are a few things that I would say, and I'll tell you how it comes back to the untethered soul in just a second. But the first thing I would say is that the best way to be inspiring is to be inspirable.
Okay.
If you let yourself be inspired, you will be inspiring. And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes it's a little bit embarrassing or, what if everybody thinks I'm a dork for being inspired by this? Or what if they think that I don't mean it? But you know what? So what? If you're authentically inspirable, you will be authentically inspiring. And what he says in this book in The Untethered Soul, one of the things he's talking about is this tendency that we have to be loving and open until someone says or does something we don't like, and then we close down. And he says, the only way that you get life energy is by staying open. And it's just a choice you make moment by moment by moment by moment. And there's nothing on earth that is worth letting yourself shut down and close yourself. And that is a really hard thing to do. And I'm not going to say that I'm perfect at it. What I will say is that for about 20 years now, I have been really consciously making the decision moment by moment by moment to stay open no matter how much it hurts in the moment, and to be in touch with my emotions and show my emotions, no matter how vulnerable that makes me feel, no matter how much I'm worried about being made fun of or whatever, to just really stay present and open to anything. And I'm not going to say I do it all the time. Okay. Don't think that I'm saying that, but I'm saying I'm always committed to it and I'm doing my absolute best all the time. And so I agree with this book, The Untethered Soul. I think that that's where that life energy comes from, is just keeping yourself open.
I think that's very powerful. So one thing I always like to think is we don't need to agree with somebody or even think that somebody is doing something great or good, but we can learn something from everybody. Basically, 100% of people in the world, we can learn something from them.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. You also mentioned that learning is a very emotional experience, and I agree very much with that. And is that something like can you use emotions to learn better?
Okay, so here's a great saying that it's going to sound like this is answering it tangentially, but it's actually answering it very directly, Dom. It's a saying from a guy I really, really respect and who I'm a big fan of his. His name's Les Brown, and he's a public speaker, and he's an old dude now, but he's still going strong, and he's just amazing. And I'm so inspired by him. And he told me a long time ago, I think, gosh, it's been maybe even 10 years now. He said, never tell a story without a point. And that's great advice. Never tell a story without a point. And by the way, tell us the point so that we for sure get the point you want us to get. Don't think the point's so obvious that you don't even need to tell us. If you're going to tell us a story, tell us the point of the story too.
Right.
So, and he said, so never tell a story without a point, and never make a point without a story. Mm. And Dom, this is one of the things that I saw in some of the course creators and it's a natural tendency for human beings, right? To just dump all these points on people and think that they're going to get them, and they get some of them. And listen, I get really drawn to do this too, because it makes sense logically. Here are the points, here's the point, here's the point, here's the point. But people don't remember those things, and they can't even stay present for them very long when there's just a big, long bunch of points without a story. But when you tell us a story that illustrates that point, we'll remember it forever.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, that's funny that you mentioned that. Ryan and I did our learning conference webinar yesterday. And one of the techniques that we come up for better remembering is also storytelling. Like, storytelling is a very ancient human way of education, of teaching children, but also adults. And it's so powerful.
It's the only way anything of importance came to us, Dom, throughout the vast majority of our deep history, is through storytelling. Because that's the only way we could remember it. So our brains very naturally value stories more than anything else.
Definitely. How do you see, now that we have obviously a lot of possibilities with the internet, online courses, which you just created yourself as well, how can that help learning in general and help tell better stories? And how can we leverage our stories maybe?
Well, I mean, one thing that I've been really, really amazed with, because, I think I've got my online course, the Speak Like a Leader Bootcamp, and I've got cohort-based version of that I run on a pretty regular basis. And then I've got a course called the Live Like a Leader program, which is a year-long cohort-based leadership, communication, personal growth, mystical journey. And I started all of this really in earnest when the pandemic hit, because, hey, all of a sudden I was not traveling all the time, Before that, I was on planes most of the time, and all of a sudden now I wasn't on planes at all. And so I jumped into this, and I am just, look, my online course made a difference for me, even in my one-on-one and small group, large group, corporate training programs. It was great to have it. But my experience over the past year has just made me incredibly excited about the future of this and the difference it can make. And it's made me much, much more excited to make new courses and to think about how I can deepen the things that I have and really bring about the difference and the change and the transformation that people want from these things. And what I've noticed that is one of the most exciting things to me is all of a sudden it's international. So imagine the depth and breadth of experience and stories and connections that's available once we take into account all of the people that are available to us globally versus just in this culture or just in this country or just in this, language. I mean, I'm lucky that it's English, but English is a language that's now becoming really global. And so the fact that we can all get together and share our experiences and our different diverse points of view and be together live in real time in these learning environments, that is just beyond exciting to me.
Definitely. Yeah, I think, that's very powerful. And as you said, we will have a lot more perspectives from people, not just in our society in all kinds of positions, but from all over the world, from different kinds of societies where, culture and thinking processes are just different. And that's such a rich, it's going to enrich our experience so much.
It's so cool. I mean, look at, you and me, right? You're a young guy in the Netherlands. I'm an old guy in the United States. Like, I don't know how we would have ever met. I mean, I'm really glad I met you, and I would have loved to meet you somehow. But I think this is one of the only ways that we would have ever gotten to know each other the way we have. And those kinds of friendships and those kind of international bonds and insights, I think that's what it's going to take for us to make it as a species, through the coming challenges that we are already facing.
I love that. I think we don't have to put our differences aside, but we have to leverage our differences, and that's how we can learn from each other. Yeah.
Absolutely.
This has been really, really great, John. So I would like to ask you, who do you think I should interview next on this podcast?
There's a woman, and I was just on her podcast this morning, kind of funny enough, and her name is Fiona Murden, and she's the author of a book called Mirror Thinking.
Okay.
And Fiona Murden, Mirror Thinking, and we just read her book in my Live Like a Leader program last month and discussed it and had her join us and talk about it with us. And she also does courses, Dom, and she does a lot of work and great. She's a brilliant, she's got much more of an academic pedigree and understanding than I do. That's more her direction. And she's a fabulous writer and does courses in a lot of the things that she writes about. And I think she would be a fabulous guest for you. She's just incredibly lovely as a person. And what she talks about is mirror neurons and the importance of understanding their impact on us and our behavior and everything. And I think you'd love talking to her. And I think that's who I would recommend.
Yeah, definitely. I would love that. I mean, mirror neurons is a principle I used myself basically in language learning a lot as well. But there are so many more applications that, no doubt you know about as well.
Yeah. So. Yeah, she did a great TEDx talk at the London School of Economics. So if people want to get a preview of her, if you do, it's you just do a search Fiona Murden TEDx London School of Economics, and you'll find that. It's really good.
Awesome. Okay, so thank you, John. And if people want to find out more about you and the courses and other stuff that you do, what's the best way for them to find out?
They can go to, I'll give you two URLs. One is executivespeakingsuccess.com. That's my website, and I do a free mini training that they can sign up for there that comes out every week. And it's just a great way to keep your head in the game of communication and great communication. So that's at executivespeakingsuccess.com. And if they want to go see the courses that I have, they can go to ess.teachable.com. I do my courses in Teachable. We have our community in Circle, and, would welcome them aboard if this sounds exciting, and promise a lifelong transformation. no matter what level they're at in terms of public speaking, because there's just no top to this mountain.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to getting your transformation as well in the future. So
Awesome. Me
yeah.
too, Dom.
Yes, thank you very much, John, for the interview.
You're very, very welcome. Thanks for having me. Take care.
All right. Thank you.